What is up, IDP Army? What is up, fantasy football fanatics? It's your man, Jordan Reigns at 50 Shades of Drunk. This is the IDP Army podcast. This is the Dynasty T. This is the offensive points. This is all of it. Okay, we do the whole gambit here, and I'm here with my man, Leo, the #1 IDP ranker in all whole planet, whole galaxy last year. It's an honor and a privilege to be here, and we are going to be talking about IDP rankings. All right, and it's gonna be top of the iceberg stuff, but we're gonna get you oriented on the guys you're gonna build your teams around in Dynasty for the upcoming couple of years, if you're hopefully setting up to actually build a meaningful dynasty. Leo, what's up? I saw you last night, 24 hours ago. We were right here. This is your third time on the channel. Thanks for coming back. How you doing, brother?
Good. Thanks for having me. Yeah, 2 days in a row. Good to see you again. Good to talk some more IDP here.
Yes, sir. And as always, y'all, make sure you go check out our podcast. Subscribe to the channel. We would love to see you on the podcast feed as well as here on the YouTube channel. We are, putting content out on Twitter as well and on TikTok. A little less on TikTok because I think TikTok's a sham, but we'll save that conversation for later. But yeah, I was talking to Leo before we came on. I guess we'll just go ahead and dive in. What was it like to rank this last year, as the #1 ranker? Obviously you came in like a wrecking ball, as my gal Miley would say. What was that like for you to come in, have the success? You set up your website, which we're going to show people here in a little bit, but what is your kind of process and what was your thought process coming in? And now that you have that first year under your belt, talk to me. Just what was it like?
I mean, it was a lot of fun. It was kind of I wanted that extra challenge of, I was being successful at fantasy leagues, and I wanted to see if I could do a different kind of competition, which was doing rankings, and then see if I could help people in the process. So it was a challenge on a couple different levels, and I started out kind of just digging into all the numbers. I'm a tax accountant by day, and I just love numbers. So just getting into the data, and then obviously watching game film to see if the numbers are lining up with what I'm seeing here. So no, it's been fun getting into it, just kind of figuring out how to help people set their lineups and help people win some trophies.
Amen to that. That's what it's about too. And I say that on this channel all the time, but I reiterate it all the time because it's real. Like, we're not overly concerned with how we appear. I'm speaking for me, our organization, for how we appear on the Twitter timeline and maybe how the greater fantasy community views us. Because we know we put together winning teams, Dynasty League winning teams constantly. We really dig into this. I say we're in the trenches, we're in the gutters. We're playing fantasy football. We're not talking about playing fantasy football. And how do you know that? I'm sitting here with a guy talking about IDP fantasy football in March. Okay, show me where else they're doing that, where it's not pandering. Doesn't exist. Not a thing. So, all right, let's go ahead and before we go into it, I'm going to kind of give you an idea. I have a system or a guideline tier that I've used for myself, what I kind of refer back to, and it's not rigorous. Like, these aren't hard cutoffs, but it's kind of an aura type of thing. So I have these tiers. So I kind of have a defensive lineman. If I think he's an elite guy, I'm looking for 3 or more of these things personally. I'm looking for a guy who I think is going to project for 13 or more sacks, 25 or more quarterback hits, 60 or more tackles, or 19 or more impact plays. If a guy can hit 3 of those things, it's hard to project anyone to hit all 4 of them. But if a guy can hit 3 of those things, generally speaking, he ends up being one of the top end defensive linemen. And again, I say generally speaking. My next kind of tier is what I call tier 2 and tier 3. I have that area where I'm projecting around 10 or more sacks, 21 or more quarterback hits, 50 or more tackles, and I have 16 or more impact plays. That's kind of my defensive linemen. And then my linebackers, and linebacker is a really strange position because it's an interesting position, but I kind of have it set up to where 130 or more tackles and then 20 or more impact plays. If you hit one of those thresholds, or both of those thresholds ideally, but if you hit one of those thresholds, you're probably going to be at the worst a borderline mid linebacker 2. So I kind of have that range there for what I call ones. Do you have any sort of numbers when you look at a season when you were doing Dynasty that you were kind of like, these are kind of my targets and then I'll kind of tweak it? Or how was that for you? Because again, I'm interested. I'm self-taught in all this. Like my process is, I mean, nobody showed me what to do. Unfortunately, there wasn't even really a scoring system around when we started playing IDP. So I kind of had to build all these parameters and then kind of build sort of narratives around how I would see them. But what are your thoughts on looking at this from a sort of a big picture point of view?
Yeah, I mean, so I guess just to take a step back, I mean, this was my first year kind of really, building out some projections. So like, I mean, historically, I would kind of look at what other people are saying to kind of give me a guide, and kind of getting a consensus of what's going out there, and then seeing if the data is kind of really there. But this year, I tried to take some historical data. I tried to take who's kind of coming up and who's going to be getting a major role in the coming year, and who certain matchups for different defenses are going to do better. But I mean, really, I've kind of focused mostly on a lot of these leagues are set up for tackle heavy, so tackles heavy for the linebackers and the safeties, and then sacks on the defensive line. But defensive tackles actually did really well this year, with getting not only pressure but also getting a bunch of tackles too. So it was a little kind of surprising this year to see the D tackles kind of up there near the top. But I think that's good for the league and good for IDP to see defensive tackles getting some attention.
Yeah, well, we got some good DTs right now too. I mean, we forget last few years, 4 or 5 years ago, we had a big crop of guys come in. We, Quentin Williams, Jeffrey Simmons, Deron Payne, Jonathan Allen, all those guys, and they all hit. They actually came in and performed pretty well. So now, and that's a valuable position. It's tough to be a truly athletic sort of game-wrecking, defensive tackle, and we have quite a few in the league right now. So like you said, it was cool to see that. I don't want to call it like a shift, but see that sort of the ebb and flow, because I remember 5 or 6 years ago we had another year like that, but they've been down a little bit. Quick question here about TJ Edwards, but bringing that up, I'll go ahead and get into it. I'll pull up our rankings now. We're gonna jump back and forth between my rankings that are in the index and then what my man Leo here has up on rpofootball.com. Make sure you guys go check out his website. Show some love to my man Leo. I said I was going to stop doing that. All right, here we go. We'll pull these in. We'll pull up Leo's first, just so we can kind of take a peek here, so we can run him through the ringer and figure out what he did wrong. How did he get here? What the hell is this?
Still a work in process, that's for sure.
All right, work in progress. He says number one IDP ranker is a work in progress, ladies and gentlemen. I should tell you the state of affairs over here. So send back up.
It's March. There's a long time to go here before football season kicks off.
So we're gonna start talking about these linebackers. Looks like you have Roquan 1, Nick Bolton at 2 for a dynasty, Foyesade Olakun, Jordan Brooks, Logan Wilson at 5, Micah Parsons 6, Fred Warner 7. Devin White 8, and then Dre Greenlaw 9. A little interested to see him there. And then we'll just stop at 10 for the purpose of this conversation. Quay Walker you have here at 10. Talk me through like what you thought about and who just talk me through this top 10.
Sure. I mean, I love number 2, Nick Bolton. I mean, he's somebody I've been eyeing all season. It's tough for me. I almost wanted to put him number 1, but Roquan, he's tough to top. But yeah, I mean, Nick Bolton at 22 years old, he really came on strong. They finally committed to an every down linebacker. That was pretty key. I was wondering how Roquan and Patrick Queen were going to kind of work together, but they seem to be doing okay. I mean, Roquan took a little bit of a hit there, but and then I mean, you got Olakun, number 3. I mean, 2 years in a row, the top linebacker. I mean, I'm sure there's some people that would ask me why I'm not putting him at number 1, but I really do like Nick Bolton quite a bit.
He's a beast. It's the behind the line of scrimmage stuff is just so valuable, and just being there to make the right play, which he seems to always do. He's really a good combination of kind of like a Tremaine Edmonds and a Roquan Smith, because he's a playmaker and he makes the right play. So love that for my Chiefs. But Jordan Brooks, you have 4, Logan Wilson 5. This is skewing pretty young too. We're not seeing a lot of these old head linebackers anymore holding out the top end here.
Yeah, I mean, part of this chart is kind of also factoring a little bit of, what value people are getting out there. Right? I think in a startup, people are not looking at these the Bobby Wagners anymore. They're getting pushed down. So I've kind of factored that in a little bit to the ranking. I mean, we talked about how to some extent Dynasty should kind of be like a 3-year window, maybe that like what can you expect out of somebody for 3 years? But I did skew this a little bit young, kind of factoring in a startup.
Yeah, so we're pretty close here. I'm gonna flip over to mine now. I do in the index, the DL linebackers are somewhat sorted together. Unfortunately, I'm not gonna try to undo that, but Roquan Smith is my top off-ball linebacker here. I have Devin White at 2, Jordan Brooks coming in at my 3, and then you can see there's a couple of more edge guys. Nick Bolton at 4. He's not in my tier 1. I'm gonna need to move him up to my tier 1. Just looking at this, I thought that I had him as my linebacker 2. I guess I don't. I'm honestly kind of like, what the heck? That's probably what I was probably doing, was probably pretending to fight my bias because I'm a Chiefs fan. So it's like, well, I'll put him at 4. But now I'm like, okay, well, if the number 1 fantasy ranker in IDP puts him at 2, it's not bias anymore. Now it's just stupidity to put him down there. So I got to fix that. Foyce Olakun right behind him. And then Logan Wilson looks like right there coming in. So we're pretty dang close on our top guys. And actually, I'm going to scroll down. There's a little more Quay Walker there, too. So that brings joy to my heart to see that we have a lot of these same guys. I'm gonna pull into Nick Bolton here real quick, just so we can look at his production profile. If y'all want to check out the index, you can become a channel member. Anybody who joins the channel, you get all of our rankings, but this is one of the things in there. 180 tackles, you can see right there. 2 interceptions, 3 pass deflections, 2 sacks. I mean, a busy guy. But he did make a lot of his points in those tackles. Points per snap, bring us up a little, 0.03. That's a really good number. Now, that is in IDP 1-2-3 scoring, which, is the default Dynasty scoring that Sleeper uses, which is what I just default to in all of our information. I try to bring it down to snaps. I don't like the points per game sort of argument. I feel like, again, we talked earlier, some people try to bring offensive ideas to defense, and they don't really work as well. So to be like, oh, this guy plays, this many points per game, I feel like that's a little tougher because certain guys have different roles. What does that mean? That means maybe a certain guy is a lot more efficient in his role. So I like to bring it down to a per snap kind of thing. So it's a little bit easier to understand who's actually producing at a high level and who's just making like big plays, if that kind of makes sense. But yeah, I love Nick Bolton here. Only his 2nd year in the league, which is kind of crazy to think about. Man, yeah, coming out, I loved him too. Go Mizzou.
Yeah, good tackle rate too, from what I remember too. I mean, he was making a lot of tackles per play or per snap. So
yeah, let's see here. 17 as rookie, had 17.9%. You can see right here, tackle rate, and then 16%. So those are, 16% is a little bit above average. I think what is average, like 15. It's like right around 15, 16% from what I remember. I have some data point bookmark somewhere. I'll post it on Twitter. Who else do you want to look at from that top group?
Well, yeah, I kind of going against you a little on Devin White. I'm kind of interested.
Let's do it.
You get your take, because I'm a little bit down on him just based off of how he played. So I'm like to kind of get your thoughts of what you saw.
Why am I still bullish on Devin White? Let's take a peek here. Well, he did get back to getting the sacks. He had 5.5 sacks this year. So screw that. Screw you haters. So that's good. I mean, this points per snap, again, that's what I look at. So right here you can see bottom right corner, 0.27 this last year. That's a good number. 0.25 is pretty much where we reach that range for me, where it's like I want that guy in my lineup pretty much across all positions. I call like 0.3 kind of that threshold for elite. So this last year, 0.27, kind of above average. Let's go back a year, 0.26. Let's go back another year, 0.36. So for me, it's not necessarily that he's going to be incredible every single year. It's that he's never let you down yet. You know what I mean? 0.27, 0.36, 0.26, and then 0.27. Yeah, it was a down year overall for him across the board. I think it was a down year for everybody in Tampa. But he has, he's buoyed his production enough for several years now to where I've kept him pretty high. Only 25 years old too, so that for me is why he's this high. Like I said, I'm going to put Nick Bolton ahead of him, but he's probably, I don't really have a reason, or I can't find any way to move him out of my top 5 personally. And he's just, a couple of more plays at the end of the year away from having another great season. So, but I probably do have him a little too high here. But I mean, it's a good buy moment for him. You definitely don't have to pay what you used to have to get him in Dynasty.
Yeah, he's a lot cheaper. I mean, I guess I was kind of looking at, he kind of had a, first half and a second half of the season. I think those sacks that you were talking about, I think a lot of them came in the first half, and I think he stopped getting passes defended too in the second half. So it was a lot of tackle heavy, and I know you talked kind of about points per game or points per snap, and I think that dropped in the second half. I know some of his teammates were getting on him and not playing very well. I don't think he had as good of a season as he had last year.
No, yeah, he was. And again, the whole Tampa Bay, I mean, the vibe, the juju there was just not good. You know what I'm saying? Like, and it's kind of like a Mike Evans thing, where it's like he didn't have a great year, but he was still Mike Evans at the end of the day. He still finished the top 15 wide receiver. He had, he was dominant in a couple of games, and it's just like you can move. Maybe he won't ever hit that absolute ceiling, but again, at 25 years old, it's hard for me to imagine Devin White isn't very fantasy relevant in Dynasty for 3-4 years going forward. And with that, with the kind of the track record of just being above average every year, he stayed pretty high for me. I remember, was it 2 years ago or 3 years ago, it was him, Roquan, and Shaq Leonard were all three like those top guys. And it's funny because of those three, Roquan was the number 3 for most people, but here we are a couple years later, and he has firmly cemented himself as that guy. Any of these other guys in this top 10 before we maybe poke around some of these defensive line rankings? And if y'all want to see our full rankings, like I said, check out rpofootball.com. Leo's got all of his rankings up there. We're just going to, again, kind of talk top of mind, top end, kind of build your dynasty team around some of these players. So, and, we're going to skew young, but we're going to, try to find you some studs on some cool teams so you have some cool guys to root for you. But anybody in particular you want to poke around at?
I mean, I was going to talk about Dre Greenlaw. You mentioned him earlier, but first for Devin White, I remember when he came out, it was. Do you take Devin White or Devin Bush? And now we see what happened with Devin Bush. The Steelers have kind of remade that whole linebacker room this offseason. So Devin White definitely is outperforming Devin Bush at this point. But let's
Bush. I'm surprised he's still in the league.
Now let's take a look at Dre Greenlaw.
Let me see if I could pull him up here real quick. All right, so let's just look for him. I'm not as bullish as you on him, but I haven't made any big adjustments in a while. So he's still tier 3, so that's good. 25.8 years old. We are okay with that. Change the orientation of this page real quick. All right, let's scroll down and take a look at old Greenlaw here. So 2022 Dre Greenlaw. Ooh, that points per snap number. I got to change this overlay real quick. Give me a sec. 0.3, that's an elite number. I was just touting it. Just touting it. Let me change this overlay real quick. There we go. All right. So Greenlaw, what we get here? Tackle percent rate, 15%, 0.3 points per snap. 850 snaps though. What was that all about? Was he not?
He did miss 2 games.
Okay.
I don't remember his snaps being low, but I think San Francisco did. One of their issues was their snap counts in general were a bit lower than some of the other teams, and sometimes they get ahead a little bit and rest their starters in the fourth quarter. But
15 impact plays in 2022, not a massive number. 3 last year, we didn't really play much. Year before that, 0.25. He's been in the league for a while. Geez, I kind of had forgot he'd been around that long.
Yeah, I mean, I like the fact that he doesn't have the big names, so you can get him at a discount. I think he came on strong. He outscored Fred Warner, which people are always going to have up there at the top. I know you love Fred Warner. Jordan.
I'm one of the only people that saved people from Fred Warner, and I'm proud of that.
he outscored Fred Warner. And this is Fantasy Pro scoring. He outscored Fred Warner in 2 less games. So he. Not somebody anybody's recognizing here, but he was doing okay. So I started
That's
picking him up.
bullish, right? I mean, that's good. I mean, that's great. I mean, like that makes me. That's a great point. I mean, I'm in on Dre Greenlaw based on that because I've had so many people try to suck me into Fred Warner, and I'm like, no. So you just gave me a great metric there. This guy outperformed Fred playing less games. Perfect. I mean, it doesn't have to be complicated.
I knew you'd appreciate that one, but I was getting bullish on Greenlaw at the start of the year. I think before the start of the year, they gave him an extension. Then I thought he would take the job over Aziz Al-Shair, who just left. So there's no threat to his job here, which I think Aziz Al-Shair will have a good chance in Tennessee there.
Oh yeah, that's a good spot.
He'll have a
linebacker spot.
He'll have a good at least 1 or 2 year window there. So.
All right, we're gonna go ahead and give him the old ascending talent tag. Leo stamp of approval. He's on the up and up, y'all. I got him in the index right now as a sell, so maybe maybe, but I'm only asking for a 4. So whatever I say sell, obviously ask for a little more than that. Yeah, very bullish on him. But again, you'd say you're skewing. Your rankings are set up a little bit more scored towards the fantasy pros, which doesn't account for quarterback hits or tackles for loss, right?
Correct.
So that is going to definitely impact the overall, way that you're going to address this, which does make a lot of sense. And even their pass deflections, they're the same as an assisted tackle, right? Or are they the same as a regular tackle?
I can't remember.
I can't remember exactly. I know it's not more than a tackle, which is really frustrating because it obviously stops the ball from coming past the line of scrimmage, but we won't get into that. All right, let's go ahead and switch gears here. Let's jump over to the defensive line players. And again, y'all, if you want to do your own research, which you should never take the word of anyone you see or hear on the internet as the truth, no matter how many followers they have, no matter how many people tell you that they know what they're doing. Do your own research. But here you can go check out all of Leo's rankings, RPO. But we're going to check out the defensive line players. Why didn't I click that? There they are. Now, this is very interesting because this is a contentious position in IDP just because of the nature of the volatility and the variance. Yeah. 1 or 2 or 3 single individual sort of plays in the season can be the difference between a guy being literally like a top 5 guy and just being like 18 or 20. You know what I'm saying? So it is tough and it's a little hard. That's why some of the auxiliary metrics people like to look at, though, are very relevant because they can project future success. I think Nick Bosa is a great example of that because even though he's been a little banged up through his career, when he's always played at a high level, and he's young. We knew he had kind of just come into the league. So it's like, okay, if we can get this guy to hit on all cylinders, fully healthy, good people around him, and like feeling himself, what could happen? Well, we just saw what happened. He had Defensive Player of the Year written all over him. And now even with his team struggling, which if anybody knows anything about football, like if your team struggles, is extremely hard for the media to say anything nice about any individual on that team. And it's really hard for the media to give them any sort of equity in the conversation that's positive. So for the fact that he was able to go through all the quarterback stuff and the Christian McCaffrey and still produce and show his ability to be that difference maker and hold his autonomy, get that award, he is who we thought he was. The guy right below him, Myles Garrett, still no Defensive Player of the Year for that guy. So, well, you know. All right, what do you got here for us? You got Nick Bosa, Myles Garrett, Maxx Crosby, TJ Watt at 4. Come on, we gonna start fighting right now. We got Brian Burns, we got Rashawn Gary, Jalen Phillips. A lot of people are very bullish on Jalen Phillips. I was doing some research on him today. I'm definitely coming in hot. You even got him again ahead of Aiden Hutchinson here, Kayvon Thibodeau at 9, and then Big Q. DT, your first DT on the list at 10. Talk to me. Who do you love? Who are you worried about on this list?
I mean, it's hard not to love Nick Bosa at the top here, and Maxx Crosby's coming off that huge season. I mean, we all kind of thought he was due for that after all those pressures the prior season. He was due for that breakout, and he actually delivered. I know some fantasy managers were a little disappointed how he finished. I don't think he had the last couple of games of the playoffs.
Yeah, the last 3 or 4 games, he was streaking hot. He was very consistent, and then He was at a point where if he would have kind of kept it up, he could have had like a crazy season. But he kind of sputtered out a little bit there at the end. Again, where it's just it was 2 or 3 more of those plays, and I mean he might have been at the top of your list here. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Like so.
Yeah.
Anyway, didn't mean to interject, but
Oh yeah, no problem. But yeah, I mean it's such a volatile position. I mean, yeah, 1 or 2 games of a guy getting a sack or not, can make a big difference. In some of these league scorings, where you get bonus points for tackles for loss and a sack and then a QB hit. I mean, those can all add up real fast. So it just takes one sack for these guys to do it, to get you up there. So that's why a lot of people will target one of these top 4 or 5 guys, before they even get to linebackers.
You really have to get one. I mean, and some of these guys you could get late, which is what's nice about the defensive line position. You didn't have to pay an arm and a leg for Jalen Phillips, Aiden Hutchinson if you played him last year. Even Quinnen Williams was a very late kind of guy, but we know that he's going to be on the field and be productive. You know what I'm saying? So it's kind of nice for these DL positions that if you know what you're looking at, you don't have to pay Nick Bosa price to get like 85% of Nick Bosa. I mean, you can get 85% of Nick Bosa down there at 12 with Hassan Reddick. You know what I mean? And maybe, maybe he ends up getting those extra couple of sacks. So the defensive line position is tough to navigate. I saw you have Brian Burns up here pretty high, and then Rashawn Gary. I actually just want to point out Nick Bosa, Maxx Crosby, Brian Burns, Rashawn Gary, and Quinnen Williams were all in the same class, right? Or was Quinnen Williams the class? Yeah, they were all in that exact same class.
I think so.
That's kind of crazy that we got half of the top 10 Dynasty guys came out in that, was it 2019, I think, or 2018? That 2018 class. Wild stuff. But we knew that class was good. That was one of the people talked about how good that class is. It's good to see that's kind of come through here. But Brian Burns, Rashawn Gary. Talk to me about these guys because I'm a little bit on them. Like I know they can do it, but I've never really seen them. I've never really seen Gary like stuff the stat sheet for a full game, and I've seen Burns get close, but he not like crazy stuff. He's had some big games, but I'm always a little tentative about guys like this. But what are your thoughts on those two in particular? Do you think this is kind of where they're going to max out in the Dynasty conversation in this?
I mean, this is kind of a jumbled mix here, and once you get past the top 4, I mean.
Yeah, it's like that next tier, you're going to count on them, and it's hopefully going to work out.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be taking 5. I mean, once I miss out on 4, I'm kind of just wait and see what's out there. I mean, I'm not going to reach to get Burns or Gary. I mean, Gary's coming off an injury. I mean, he's young, and he actually did really well, before he got injured. He was looking pretty good, but I mean, I would be happy getting Hutchinson later, but I assume other people have him a little bit higher. I mean, you're really targeting those top 4, and then you're kind of looking after that. You got Brian Burns pulled up.
Yeah, I got Burns pulled up here because I've actually been considering moving him in some leagues. Just because, again, like let's look at the tackles in that upper right-hand corner right here, this blue bar. So 63 this last year, and I remember that reference I said earlier, like that 60 number is good. And I think it was 25 quarterback hits. So he does hit several of these thresholds that I kind of had established, or he at least hit the tackle one. Let's go down a little bit. 0.25 points per snap. 50 tackles last year. That's the thing of what I remember. I think from what I remember about Burns is his tackle numbers float just a little bit lower than what I love personally, just because. But he's one of these guys where the upside is undeniable because when he's on, he's basically unstoppable. I mean, even going back to 2020, he had 21 quarterback hits. That's a huge number. I think that's only his second year. Yeah. So he's consistently been getting behind the line of scrimmage and disruptive. I'm kind of with you, though, where I don't know if he's ever going to get into that top 4 kind of tier. But I really love him in this next group of guys, which I believe is where I have him, or maybe he is in my that top tier. He's right on the edge, I know for sure. But that next tier guys who might not hit those elite numbers, but you can win a championship with him. Yeah, he's that last guy in that bottom tier, and I just moved him up there. Anybody else you want me to pull up here from your list that we were kind of looking at, just to kind of poke around their production?
I'm trying to look here. I mean,
Let's take a look at Maxx Crosby. He's always fascinating. And people,
Yeah, he's always a good guy to look at here.
old Maxie, I think it's he. He's not a tier 1 guy for me, so people probably come for me. Where is he? Quay, you know what he's
Yeah,
doing.
I mean, while we're talking D line here, I mean, one of the things I wanted to at least mention is we got a percentage of our population playing sleeper, and we got a percentage playing MFL, and MFL, my fantasy league switched over. A lot of these guys that were sitting at linebacker are now D line, and that's a pretty big difference. So like, there may be some guys now playing D line that it just changes the whole curve.
Yeah, it does. And I'm such a big proponent. Again, I've said this 100 times. Yeah. We need to make it frictionless. If we want people to play IDP, we have to eliminate all friction. And nobody really agrees with me, and that's fine. And they want to protect the integrity of the game, and I respect the fuck out of that. And I also am so happy that I don't have to be the one that fights that battle. I'm fighting the other battle. But Maxx Crosby, still defensive line player right now in sleeper. He might get dual tagged, but 0.3 points per snap. Look at these defensive edge snaps, 1,085. He was out there a lot. 88 tackles. 88 tackles. That's some crazy big tackle numbers from an edge player. Crazy high snap number too, over 1,000.
Yeah, he was on the field all the time. I mean, that's really what you want in a defensive line. I mean, I think you look, in the second tier, you start running into guys that are only on the field 50%. I mean, they may be making plays and getting pressures or getting sacks, but they're not on the field 50%. Just 50%. Then like you're limited to what they can do.
Yeah. Yep. That was one of the other I've toyed with adding to my criteria is averages on a season over, and I have thresholds of like 55%, because that's kind of where guys like Justin Houston, Yannick Ngakoue, these third down guys kind of hang around. And then you get some of these guys that are a little less, but are still very, very good on like a 70% snap roll, 75. But then you get a handful of guys, and there's a very small handful of them, but they exist. Whereas like Maxx Crosby, TJ Watt's kind of like that. Every now and then, Myles Garrett will play almost every snap. He's not consistent, but he does have games where he almost never comes off the field, I've noticed. Those guys are the ones you really, really want. And you'll have, but ideally, if you can get between 85 and like 95, that's really good. But I'm with you there. I agree. When you just a guy that's on the field with that many opportunities, it's hard to have any good reason to fade him, even if he's the least efficient player ever. You know what I mean? Even if he misses half his tackles, if he's out there for 1,000 snaps, he's getting all these opportunities. It's going to add up. We have a couple of questions here in the chat, which I'll defer to just because, we like to talk to the people. Appreciate you, Rugaroo. We didn't talk. PJ Edwards was not in our top 10, 12 for either of us, but somebody here is asking, says, Spakes Monkey Mafia says, speaking of TJ Edwards, with him gone, is it now Nakobe Dean season? I was actually having a talk today in the DMs with old DJ Keltown out here in the Twitter streets about some PFF and Nakobe Dean and, just chopping it up. But what are your thoughts on Dean, TJ Edwards? Do you have any strong thoughts, opinions, feelings on either of these guys?
Well, TJ Edwards is going to have to fight with Tremaine Edmonds, to get plays. I mean, I think that's going to be a pretty even battle. They might cut into each other a little bit there. But then Nakobe Dean, I mean, he only had a few snaps that he was out there, and he looked pretty good when he was out there. But it's different when you got a full season to see what he can do. I think he's a little bit undersized, but.
That worries me. It used to be something I liked about like Devin Bush, and then that didn't work. So now when people are like, oh, he's like an undersized hybrid fast linebacker, I'm like, so he's not going to work out? Is that what you're saying, or what are you saying?
Well, no, yeah, I mean, some of those guys, they sometimes have a tough time getting through the blocks and everything. I mean,
yeah.
I mean, David Long actually, I was a big fan of his coming into the year, and he actually has been fighting through those blocks. But some of those guys at that same size can't do it. So we'll see if he can do it with a full season. And there's a reason that they didn't put him out there. They could have put him out there more with Kaiser White.
Exactly. Like there was a reason he didn't play. I don't know what it is, but I don't like that there was a reason at all. Don't love
Mhm.
it. You know what I mean? If you're going to be drafted that high, that kind of tout around you, and then you're going to come out and play special teams, that's fine if you played like 600 defensive snaps too. I'm okay with that. But I don't think he played, like you said, like a dozen, 2 dozen, you know what I'm saying, defensive snaps, and then he played some special teams. That's scary. That's very, 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 very scary. Not what you want. Not good.
So I'm not overpaying for him. I mean, if he's there in the draft, I'll take him. But probably somebody.
We're
else
talking
is,
about Nakobe Dean again. Anybody who was just tuning in or has kind of missed, I had Thibodeau question on the screen there, but we're talking Nakobe Dean because he was a big name last year on all these rookies. And I would always just say, be a little careful with your rookies, offense and defense, because until they hit the field, you have no idea what they're going to do. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, he was the best running back since Jamal Williams, since LaDainian Tomlinson, until he wasn't. Until he stepped foot on NFL field, then he wasn't. You know what I'm saying? So, Jamin Davis, another big linebacker, got a lot of run towards the end of the draft process 2-3 years ago. Ended up going in the first round, right? And then it's just so be mindful.
I mean, any of those rookies, especially people in redraft, people take those rookies and it's just like, well, why? Like, you got somebody with an established role that has done it already. Like, just skip over it.
Well, again, it's taking the short-term win. Look, I found the next big thing over I won a championship. Which, if you all want to win little wins, that's your prerogative. I want big wins. All right, so we had another question. Before we jump into, I'll show a couple of defensive line guys that I kind of like or maybe don't like. And then we'll talk a handful of defensive backs. Field any more questions y'all have in the comments out here. We love interacting with the fam. But Space Monkey Mafia says Thibodeau should really be linebacker, not a DL. Again, I try to not get involved in these sort of petty semantic conversations around IDP players personally, because I think they take away from the real issue, which is like just getting it in front of more people. But do you have a comment or smart ass remark back to my guy Space Monkey for this one?
Just when we set these rankings, it's for whatever the platforms put them at. I really don't care I'll rank the guy wherever they put him at. And so
I don't care what position he plays.
MFL switched him over to D end right here. They switched a whole bunch of guys. They moved to the edge, true position, what some people were calling it. Moved him over to the edge and put him as a D end, and they made all the switch. They switched all these guys over. So I'm just going by what the platforms call them. With Fantasy Pros, I have to rank these guys to kind of fit all these different systems. So I got to rank Thibodeau last year.
Fantasy Pros.
Yeah. So last year I had to rank Thibodeau as a linebacker and a D end. So D line. So it's like I had to put him in twice, which is more work.
Bro, and like you said, it's so much work. Like, people that don't do IDP don't even get it. It's like these are like small problems, but they're actually huge fundamental flaws with everything about IDP. Like, even when we go to rank, we got to rank Thibodeau as linebacker and defensive line. Why? You know what I mean? Like, why can't we sort this out in a way, again, where it's frictionless? This conversation is friction to what people are actually here for. Even they want to hear about our rankings, and I've taken us off the path. I've led us off the straight and narrow. It got to me. All right, we'll get back to what we came here for, the Lord's work. All right, spreading the love, spreading the joy of IDP. I'm gonna pull up my defensive line guys here. And I have a pretty similar-ish setup of guys. I have Micah Parsons as my top D-line guy. I default to Sleeper because that's where I play on all my leagues. I think I have one MFL league anymore. Again, it's friction. It's a lot easier for me to get on Sleeper on the phone than it is to, boot up, get the satellite out and get on MFL and try and figure out what's going on over there. But Micah Parsons, my top guy, defensive line, TJ Watt. I love these hybrid linebacker DL guys because I've kind of noticed, I don't know if, we'll go into it in detail maybe another day or in some other format, but I've kind of noticed that some of these guys that play these these outside linebackers versus just true defensive ends, they kind of do a little bit more. Now, I don't know if that's just because of the crop of guys we have in the league right now, but I feel like they're doing more as far as the batted passes. They're doing a little bit more as far as the forced fumbles, even their tackle numbers, generally speaking, Maxx Crosby, kind of being the caveat here, are generally just a little bit higher, I feel like I've noticed, than defensive end players. So I like them just because of the kind of versatility they offer. And, Micah Parsons at any given moment could play a full game as an off-ball linebacker, which is free money, free tackles. It's nice to just have that kind of versatility in a player. But our top end guys are very similar, a little bit different in their order. But tiers, and you don't have yours broken into tiers, but, based on our conversation, it sounds like in your head you have mental markers where you tier your guys off, which we all kind of do. And that's how you should be looking at these players, within groupings of values. I have Landry pretty high still. A lot of people don't like him just because he doesn't get home as often, but he does get quite a few tackles. Fell off this last year just because he had the ACL tear, but I still have him very high because he's been consistently pretty good. Wanted to give him a shout. Hassan Reddick pretty high. Trey Hendrickson, I'm always a little higher on him than some other people. He's just better than I think people wanted to admit, and it's just been nice to be bullish on him the last 2 seasons. Maybe this year it comes back to bite me in the butt, but it's worked out pretty well the last couple of years, so I'm liking that. DeForest Buckner, Alex Highsmith, a couple other guys I really like. I have Kayvon Thibodeau there as well, so pretty similar grouping there. My tier 2 defensive end, you can see, is pretty big. Because, there's quite a few guys who I think have that kind of range of outcomes. Shaquille Barrett was the number 1 defensive line player a couple of years ago. So the range of outcomes for several of these guys could definitely rocket them up. But as we get down here lower, 27 years old, 27 years old, 30 years old. So it's just kind of a natural progression that they would kind of move down as time goes on. So anybody that you see kind of in my top, this second tier here that you want to push back on, have any questions about, want to look at their profile?
You have Harold Landry here, just injury. You could say the same thing about Rashawn Gary on my list. How high do you guys, want to put guys up on injuries? Do you want to take that risk? Definitely something you have to consider when you're drafting somebody, especially in a startup. There's a couple guys. I forget who else I was looking at here. But injuries definitely have to be considering when you're investing in somebody if they're going to stay healthy.
Those points per snap, 0.33 for Rashawn Gary last year. Woo, that's a big number.
Yeah, he played well when he was healthy. It's just staying healthy.
And that was the first year he's been injured because they've been slowly working him into a more prominent role since he got there. So it's kind of unfortunate that last year, probably his first year to really be the guy, he does end up getting hit with that injury bug. But I do love that. I love that you have him high. He's in my tier 2, but seeing that 0.33, again, I'm a sucker for an outlier. If I've said it once, I've said it 100 times. Those are the kind of players I want on my fantasy team.
I was going to also talk about Hendrickson. He kind of disappointed as far as tackle numbers, I think.
He's always, that's not. But the thing is with Hendrickson is he always makes up for it, in my opinion, with his quarterback hits because he always gets a ton of those. And those are worth 1 point in IDP 1, 2, 3. So 24 quarterback hits, that compensates a lot for only 10 assisted tackles. Granted, that is not great. His tackle number is pathetic. 32, that's pathetic. I'll call it what it is. But 24 quarterback hits for a guy playing 629 snaps, that's not pathetic. That's very meaningful. And then on top of that, actually get home for 8 of those, that's pretty meaningful. Points per snap, 0.25. That's, a guy I can count on to start at the defensive line position. Take a look here. The year before, 27 quarterback hits, 14.5 sacks. So he converts a lot of his hits too. And those points per snap, there's nothing unsustainable about a 0.28, 0.27 type of number. 0.33, here he is, Rashawn Gary here.
Yeah, but that's where, the scoring system matters so much. Fantasy pros in my home leagues don't use the QB hit. So that makes a big difference.
And he's a perfect example of an argument of a player why it's so necessary. Same with Carl Lawson. And actually, Carl Lawson used to be the poster boy for this because people actually liked Carl Lawson. People don't like Trey Hendrickson in the football world because PFF didn't like him, so it doesn't work as well when I say, well, he gets a ton of quarterback hits. But Carl Lawson was the same way. He'd play like 600 snaps. He'd get like a dozen tackles, he'd get like 5 sacks, but he'd get like 30 quarterback hits. But that would mean nothing for most people in fantasy. And I was like, he's affecting the play in a big way, in such a big way that the Jets are going to give him a shit ton of money and everyone's going to say he's good. And you're not even going to account for that in fantasy. And so he was a kind of a poster child for we got to start putting quarterbacks in our scoring systems. If we're going to have a conversation, and the conversation about pressures has just been done to death, and it's so annoying because it's subjective. I'm like, great, let's, if we got to give a guy points per pressures, if we got to bring it into the conversation, let's not talk about the thing that's abstract and subjective and not real. And let's talk about quarterback hits, which is pretty dang close. Not a sack, but we know that's fucking pressure. I mean, if you're hitting him, that's pressure. I mean, we know that's pressure. So let's count that for something. Maybe we'll miss half the pressures. Maybe we'll miss 2/3 of them. But at least we're going to account for some of them. So that was kind of my thought process. That's why I think it's so important. That's why, like you said, like a guy, Trey Hendrickson, for us, is very fantasy relevant. But 25 points, I mean, that's big. I mean, suddenly you go from 183 points here to, you take 25 away from that, and you're looking at a guy that's, barely put up 150 points on the season-ish. That's not going to be great. That's minus 2 points a game, basically, down the line, right? I mean, that's just rough math, but it does matter. It does matter. I'm kind of wondering if/when Fantasy Pros is going to pull IDP 1, 2, 3 into some of their back end stuff, just because they have this working functional relationship now with Sleeper, where they're promoting Sleeper on their site and Sleeper kind of pushes back to their content. So I don't know why they haven't integrated or at least brought some sort of, some sort of legitimization in a way to like the scoring system that is IDP 1, 2, 3 on the back end of Sleeper, but that's neither here nor there, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much they really look at it from year to year. I mean, that may be the question is like, is anybody asking them to look at it?
No, and that's, you're 100% right, because again, that's where if I don't do, if I'm not the guy out here fucking kicking people in the head and saying pay attention to IDP aggressively, there's other people politicking the right way, and that moves really slow. And I need to just get on there and be like, Fantasy Pros, fix this.
I mean, it was my first year, so I was just kind of learning the system and how to do well at it and see what the scoring was, but not really asking any questions about.
Well, you've definitely got the pull to make some to push things in the right direction if you were to so choose to use your powers that way, I think. Because again, I mean, if someone like me was able to get IDP 1, 2, 3 and Sleeper, I would hope that somebody of your communication abilities and stature could at least broach the subject as the number one IDP guy on their platform.
Yeah, I mean, especially if I got a couple people that are in the group to come together on it. I mean, I think they'd be more receptive.
The togetherness, it's tough. I know I'm a little obtuse, so I won't lie about it, but it is what it is. Let's see what this dark mode's all about.
But if I got somebody like Ryan Sitzman or some couple of you got top guys,
Ryan.
If I talked him into it and he said he agreed, like
he won't.
They'd listen to us. I mean, I don't know
that's
what he
plays.
That's
the thing. And this isn't like shade at Ryan or anything, but like there's certain guys that are just like they're not trying to be social movers. They're not trying to change things. They're not trying to be pioneers or leaders. I mean, they're definitely trying to like be here and be a part of what's going on, and have a level of authority or whatever. But as far as like, okay, now we're going to do something different, most people don't like to be in the front of that line. You know what I mean? And it's unfortunately a lot of the people that could make that sort of apply pressure just don't do it for whatever reason, which is, again, it's a choice. I mean, you don't have to do it. Just because you can doesn't mean you have to. I can't get the DB rankings to load.
It's not coming up.
There we go. It's because it's in dark mode for some reason. I don't know why. Anywho, we're going to close y'all out here with our top defensive back rankings. Again, like I said, thank you so much for being here, Leo. We appreciate you. It's been a good conversation. Again, this isn't exhaustive. There's more than 25 IDP players in the world. These are just the kind of guys that you're going to be going up against week in and week out that are going to be difference makers, and you want to get as many of them on your team as possible so that your opponent sees them and says, fuck, I'm about to get wrecked. And you're like, yep, that's right. So let's talk about these DBs. You got Derwin James as your DB1. I had a long history of combating that and fighting that, but I have assimilated to I've joined the herd. I am now part of the Derwin James DB1 herd, and I'm happy to be here. Thanks for letting me join the group, guys. Jalen Petrie at 2, coming in hot as a rookie with 148 tackles from the defensive back position.
Quite a few. Yeah.
Thereabouts. Wild stuff. Jaquan Brisker, 24, didn't have a massive season, but we did see playmaking ability, so I love him up here. I kind of comped him to Derwin James, like the next Derwin James, sort of. And, you know, low-key, with all the moves Chicago's been making, they've already got some stars, you know, some quiet stars developing like Jaquan Brisker, so it'll be interesting to see what he can do this next year. Jeremy Chin at 4, I'm sure you are getting hell for that. Because he doesn't line up in the right spot. Bob Buda Baker at 5, Kyle Duggar 6, Kyle Hamilton 7, Minkah Fitzpatrick 8, Antoine Winfield 9. Oh my gosh. Cameron Curl at 10, Talanoa Hufanga at 11, and we'll just read off 12. Chauncey Gardner Johnson. I love this. I love this because these are a lot of guys that I think a lot of people do kind of want to push back on for whatever reason. But at the same time, it's like, these are the known names of guys we know have produced. You know what I mean? Like, you kind of have to give credit where credit's due. I love it. I love that you have Winfield at 9. People have been trying to dunk on him for so long. It makes no sense. Minkah Fitzpatrick, another guy. And I just love it. Just tell me how you got here.
Well, yeah, I mean, Winfield, I mean, he's a guy I'll be targeting for sure. I mean, he's only 24. He played a lot of slot snaps this past year. He's playing close to the line of scrimmage. You know, you might look at his scoring total as, you know, he finished, you know, in the 30s, but his scoring average was closer to 10. So like,
he missed a couple of games.
Exactly. So he'll be a little bit underpriced. You know, defense is probably going to be on the field quite a bit with, you know, I think they got Baker Mayfield right now. He got 4 sacks, 7 tackles for loss. You know, he had 80 tackles in 13 games. So like,
he's freaking good.
Yes, he's good. You know, I just like where he's playing. I like, you know, how they're utilizing him.
Let's take a look here.
I'm bullish on him.
I love it. I love it so much. 764 snaps. So you can't just look at his end of season and be like, oh, he was DB, whatever. 0.27. That is borderline 0.3-ish. That's that elite number. Let's see if he's done that before. 0.25. That's a good number. Let's go back to that rookie year. 0.21. So he's gotten better every single year, too. Another thing people said after his rookie season, oh, he's not that good. He can't get better. You know, everybody has to go backwards for whatever reason. If a player is good in fantasy football, the consensus is just like, well, he can never do better. And it's like, maybe, just maybe, get him coached up a little bit, you know? Yeah, wow. 3 passes defended, 7 tackles for loss, 4 sacks. Yeah, I love Winfield. I'm glad you have him up there. 24 years old, too. Can't be understated that he's going to be a threat and a meaningful piece of a lot of people's IDP teams going forward for a while. Similar sort of setup here on the top end as you. Talk me through Kyle Hamilton, because we know he's drafted high. We know that Chuck Clark moved on to the Jets. We know Deshaun Elliott moved on to the Lions. That was last year. So he I have to assume this is just because he's basically going to be that de facto guy. And we've seen quite a bit of good production from the safeties there, consistent production from them. But what are your thoughts on him, you know, based on what you saw last year and going forward this year? Obviously, you're bullish.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think a lot of people drafted him as the rookie DB number 1 last year. You know, I think I liked how he got, you know, the production he got with the snaps as the season progressed. And then, you know, obviously Chuck Clark not being there is going to make a big difference. You know, I like the way they utilized him. He was kind of jack of all trades. You know, you could play a lot of different spots and make plays on the ball. You know, it's hard, you know, guy 22 years old, and it's hard to, you know, these DBs, I mean, there's you're looking at some older ones, kind of hanging around. But I like what I've seen so far from Hamilton. I think he's been pretty productive when per snaps or whatever. He was.
Let's take a peek.
Up there.
0.28. That's a big number.
And I know. At one point in the season, I think PFF had him as the number 1 DB, which was kind of funny.
He's got to be good.
He kind of, it's kind of funny because he was limited snaps.
Yeah, I think he was. I think they said like they do that whole minimum, like I think it was like minimum like 2 snaps or something like that.
And but it's still, I mean, he did play well. I mean, there were some concerns of him coming out of the draft. That, he was going to have. I think he was bad in the preseason or something.
It was a level of competition. I mean, we knew they liked Chuck Clark. He earned his role there. And then they brought in, was it Marcus Williams? Was the free safety they brought in? So we knew they brought him in too. And he's another guy that PFF loved, graded really well. So we knew he wasn't going to come off the field, basically. It wasn't like Geno Stone, or there was another. Who was the other defensive back there? I forget. Somebody else was kind of in and out of the lineups a lot last year. Oh, what was that guy?
Yeah, I think you might be right.
I can't remember his name, but anyway, Kyle Hamilton, essentially, he should slot into a very meaningful position. Like you said, I'm with you. We kind of know, too, based on history of organizations, that the Ravens historically kind of don't baby, but they don't play their rookies super heavy at any position almost ever. So to me, for him to even get 548 snaps, that's a good sign in my eyes. So I expected him to do maybe more like 300-400, just kind of rotate in and out a little bit. I mean, that's still a pretty significant number of overall snaps on the season. That means that I think that, Harbaugh and the guys wanted to get him acclimated because they knew that he was essentially going to be the heir apparent pretty quickly. So I think that's reflected in your rankings of him, which you have him in here in your top 8. I love that. I'm not sure exactly where he is in mine. He's in my top 10-ish area. Basically, what I've learned in the past 56 minutes is that we see quite a few of these players eye to eye, or at least, tier to tier, which is encouraging for me because, again, when you're in the presence of greatness, you should be trying to learn at all times. So it's good to see that I'm on the right path. I am picking up some of your good habits, some of your keen eyesight in some of these things. Any final comments on any of these guys? Anybody here, like a Cameron Curl take or anything like that before I kind of pull up some of these comments over here and maybe we roll out of here for the evening?
Yeah, I mean, I like Cameron Curl. I mean, another guy I have right below him is Bufanga. I'm probably not drafting him that high. I'm a little nervous about how, kind of how he gets used, kind of deep, deep a little bit more. He kind of faded a little bit in the second half of the season. I think people are going to remember his first half of the season when they're drafting, and I'm going to kind of fade him a little bit. You've got Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw who are going to, get all those tackles. And like we said, I think the snaps there in San Francisco were a little bit lower too. So he's somebody probably that I'm, I have him up there, but I'm, most likely somebody's going to be taking him before I get a chance.
Yeah, and that's fair. And again, I have this written down, I'll kind of share my thought on rankings, big picture before we get out of here. But, rankings are a combination of several things. It's combinations of projections. It's a combination of your personal priorities, a combination of your confidence in a player. So it's not necessarily just like an arbitrary list. Like you might have him ranked that high, but like you said, you're not going to draft him that high because your confidence level is a little bit lower. You even said it there, but you still ranked him that high because your projections, you see a way for him to get that high. You know what I mean? So I've been kind of deconstructing the whole idea of rankings lately. Because I'm like, what are rankings really? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I've kind of ended on that. It's projections, it's priorities, and it's confidence. You know what I mean? And it's a combination of all those things. It's not necessarily this is the order you should draft them in, or this is the order of who's the best, or even what I actually absolutely think is going to happen, because it's going to change from day to day. The projections, if new people are coming in, that's going to affect it. That's one big variable. My priority based on the team I'm building is going to affect how I'm ranking particular players within a tier. A whole tier of linebackers, or running backs might be actually down a whole other tier because I'm behind or I have better options available at a different position. So you kind of, again, you're building yourself these, I don't know, parameters to where you can say, okay, I've gotten to this point. Maybe now I can readjust. You have to kind of know where your lines are, and you have to know what those variables are you're looking for to get there. So, and some of those are abstract. It's not just the raw numbers. It's, priority. What position? Or am I going to prioritize the tackles or the sacks? Or am I going to prioritize young versus, known production? There's a lot of different things that go into it that aren't just a number. You know what I'm saying? So I love that you kind of talked about that with Hufanga in particular, because he's a perfect example of that, where it's, I'm with you. The upside is there. He's got the skill set, but there's other things around him that maybe hold him down. So you deprioritize him a little bit. But your confidence is still there because we know he's a good player. So he still pushes his way back up into that back end DB1. So I think that's a great place to end the show here, actually. Any final comments, words of wisdom for the IDP army that's out there, for the general fantasy football fanatic that may or may not have accidentally stumbled upon this show?
I guess I'd just say, we're going to be updating these rankings every month. We're looking at this stuff every day. It's constantly changing in these lists, and it's, like you said, it's on projection. So, but the IDP Army and RPO football are going to stay on top of these and give you the stuff to help you win.
Bang, bang, exactly. And that's the thing too. Leo's got both sides of the ball. We got both sides of the ball. Ball's in your court. All right, all y'all. I won't put any names on it, but I'd be scheming through y'all's discords. I'd be looking at y'all's price points. You'd be charging people for IDP content out here that I know is not as good as mine. Shame on you. Okay. All right. That's all from us. We love you. We appreciate you, IDP Army. Until next time, that was your top 25-ish IDP players for Dynasty Fantasy Football going forward for the rest of the year. We will be back soon with more. Go check out Leo's website, and I bid you adieu.